Welcome to Cover Art Fail! Tonight's episode in Fail, the Sega Master System. The Sega Master System is one of those consoles that seems to be forgotten by most here in North America. It was the 8-bit competition to the NES's dominance in the video game market during the late 80s. It had a very eclectic game package that could easily have gone toe-to-toe with the NES, complete with similar controller setups and a light gun peripheral. Sega's mindset was thus: Sherlock Holmes had his Moriarty, the Yin had its Yang, and the Nintendo Entertainment System had its Sega Master System. But ultimately it was doomed to failure. Its total lack of third-party support and the fact that the NES had gobbled up over 80% of the market in North America made it nearly impossible for it to compete. And it really is a shame too. The games for the console were different and offered a fresh alternative to some NES titles. It attempted to showcase an ability to outdo the NES with similar titles, and there are also some games that could have been considered blatant rip-offs of NES titles. Again, this is all case-by-case subjective opinion and is better suited for another show. I'm here to tell you one of the reasons I believe the console failed, and I feel ultimately is its lasting legacy. It's the covers. You know, cover art fail, the reason why you're watching the show, hence the name. This episode will be a little bit different. I'm going to go through a lot of covers here, and most are going to be bad. And since there will be so many covers, I felt it necessary to put them into categories, and then revealing the worst of the worst at the end.
Everybody got that?
I felt that this was the best way to go about doing this, so let's just get right to it. The first game I want to mention is a little game called Double Hawk. This game is a basic shooting game with a view from behind the main characters. It involved an exaggerated storyline about violence and sending in the only guys who could defeat the undefeatable. You know, generic enough. That is until you scroll down the cover a little bit. Man, this is a hot mess. You got soldiers, tanks, battleships, and the not too conspicuous ripoff images of Stallone and Schwarzenegger from what appears to be First Blood Part 2 and Commando. So why do I show you this first? Because in my opinion, it's total awesome sauce. I mean, how can you look at this cover and not want to play it? Like I said, it's a hot mess. A hot freaking mess with freaking Sly Stallone and Arnold on the cover. Hell, I want to play it now. Plus, I wanted to show you a decent cover for the Master System before I get into the real shitstorm. And it perfectly leads me into the main critique of the Master System's covers. Let's put Double Hawk here along with 3 other seemingly random Master System games. Can you spot the commonality of these covers? Well, it's the grid. Nearly every Master System title has that damn blue and white grid on the covers. Why is that? At the time, I couldn't really understand what Sega developers were thinking by having this grid. My guess is that they were trying to emulate the holodeck from Star Trek The Next Generation. You know, that room where you could conjure up just about anything from fantasy realms to books. Maybe they thought it would play to the consumer's visceral feelings of playing in a lifelike world. That they could say, Sega, simulate Golden Axe Warrior, which may or may not be a Zelda ripoff, and then he would be transported to a unique and highly interactive world. I'm not sure the real reason, but that grid became synonymous with the Master System. And another thing, this grid was so prevalent that it often cut out some of the more interesting artwork on the covers. Take for example, Lord of the Sword. Despite having a title that was hard to save 5 times real fast, and a He-Man-esque looking hero whose sword I can't tell is stuck in that log or trying to strike that pygmy Godzilla looking thing, the artwork is compelling enough for me to pop in the cartridge and see what it's all about. But then that damn grid shows up cutting off the sky. Why'd they feel the need to shoehorn that grid in there? It's almost like they just gave up, as if it was too labor-intensive to draw clouds around that big sun there. I mean, you have a decent game like Double Dragon or Afterburner, and then you have a grid overtaking major points in the artwork. These games were well known enough to maybe get away with a snafu like that, but not for games like Aerial Assault or Assault City. Well, let's move forward onto more bad covers. And while the aforementioned grid plays a huge part in most of these, some would be horrible no matter what is in the background. How about the Alex Kidd series of games? For those that don't know, Alex Kidd was the unofficial face of Sega in the early years, much like Mario for Nintendo. His games had a decent mix of platforming and action to rival the Mario series, but it could never overtake him. It could possibly be a result of the shoddy artwork the game covers had. Alex was one of those characters that had a harsh translation from Japanese to the North American markets, or what I've deemed Capcom's disease. In Japan, he resembled some kind of monkey child, or possibly a munchichi, while in America he looked like one of those creepy Hummel figures that the old lady from the rickety house up the street collects. Here's some of the cover art from the games in the series. While the artwork isn't by any means totally awful, it's still pretty crappy. The covers look silly, but they represent the character, the action, and the gameplay very well. It's not until you get to the final Alex Kidd game of the Master System that you find total failure. Alex Kidd in Shinobi World. Not only is it insulting in that it's lampooning one of the coolest titles on any Sega console, even though its Master System cover suffered from the grid problem, it just looks goofy. They finally clamped down on the look of Alex Kidd, the monkey child look I guess. The thugs look redonkulous and unintimidating, and then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then you have the sun or moon looking thing that's giving its best dick. And then look. Adair. I'm guessing they were going for a more playful take on the Shinobi series, like in the vein of Mighty Final Fight before it, but including Alex Kidd just crushed its hopes of being successful. The Wonder Boy series of games also suffered from a problem of having a weird cover character. In the third game of the series entitled The Dragon's Trap, we have a creepy Hummel figure as a knight battling extremely non-threatening medieval folklore. And it's safe to say it's an upgrade from the previous title that had a more adult and even creepier Wonder Boy performing epic ponage on a red knight. Gah, that's not a face I picture when I see a knight swinging a sword. And one final note on creepy Hummel figures, Aztec Adventure. God, if I saw this guy's face run at me, I'd throw something at him too. He looks like he might be trying to snag his twig and two berries, if you know what I mean. And I would be remiss in showing you the cover art in the boxes without mentioning a major flaw the Master System had with its artwork, that being its total lack on any of the cartridges. They were just bland cartridges with a title of the game and nothing else, except that damn grid. Compare these Double Dragon cartridges and you tell me what seems more appealing. Interesting artwork usually trumps zero artwork in my opinion. The next category of fail, if you will, involved the cover within a cover approach. There really isn't a whole lot to rant about these insofar as the major flaw of this approach. It's freaking dumb! Does this make you want to play the game? Ooh, look! It's on a card and it fits between my thumb and index finger. La-di freaking da! I can't believe that anyone thought this was worth the cost of paying someone to photograph it. And you want me to show you real quick how I know to the video game industry that everything old is new again? Boom with the stupid! Not to mention that these cover within a cover games relied solely on the grid to sell the game. Which brings me to the final main category that plays like a broken record throughout this review, the grid. I know I've been beating the drum on this the whole time, but it really is a problem. Remember Alex Kidd? Yeah, I showed you the sequels, but I neglected to show you the original and the most popular, mind you, game in the series. This is it. No background at all, just a poorly drawn character. It's almost as if he's punching the cover itself for sucking. Wonder Boy 2 had a problem with his first title, in that you had no idea where the hell it was taking place. He's jumping over a snail, but from what? And to what? And he's wearing a loincloth. Is the world a prehistoric world? Who the hell knows, because they didn't feel like drawing one on the cover. And this happened with so many games on the Master System. They did it with a character like Rocky and Rambo who had pre-established settings that they could have easily ripped from a movie poster but didn't. They had Gangster Town and Bank Panic, which had neither the town or the bank. How about the Great Sports series of games? I can't tell if the sports are great because the covers sure as hell aren't. Or maybe Enduro Racer, which, well, I'm not sure what's going on here, so let's just skip it. Ugh, it's just awful and illogical. But that's not even the worst of it. Here are the top 3 worst majority grid covers, and since the majority grid covers dominate the Sega Master System library, this will serve as an impromptu absolute worst for the entire system. First up, Zillion. It's a shooter in the model of elevator action with puzzle sequences to boot. Besides having a funny name, the cover looks like it's showing some kind of futuristic microwave. I know that this is part of the puzzle sequence within the game, but someone browsing through a gaming store and looking at covers wouldn't know that. And it really goes to show you how bad it was received and that the makers of the sequel used a more intricate cover for the next title. The number 2 worst cover art in the Master System goes to Pro Wrestling, and I'm having trouble looking at this and having my brain process at the same time. He has a head in a headlock, but he himself does not have a head. So is it his own head in a headlock? Squeezing up against his man titties there? Or is he just the famous headless wrestler within the game and he has another wrestler in a headlock? Why do they think this would make someone want to pick up and play it? The sheer morbid curiosity of how a man could put himself in a headlock? I mean, God! And the absolute worst Sega Master System cover goes to Black Belt. It's just a foot kicking the cover. Not a foot with a leg attached to a karate champion, not the karate champion attached to the leg and the foot, not even the friggin' black belt. Just a foot. What makes this cover even more spurious is that it was originally supposed to be a game based on the Fist of the North Star anime, which is the only anime in the world that I actually give a crap about. That's what makes it the worst. Even though they stripped the story, the characters, and the overall gameplay, I will always be constantly reminded that this absolute turd of a cover was originally supposed to be Fist of the North Star. And this brings the entire review to its conclusive theme for Master System covers: laziness. The artwork is the laziest of any console from any generation. Not putting any art on the cartridge, lazy. Taking a picture of a card for the cover, lazy. Not completing the rest of the background, lazy. Putting as little as possible on the cover, lazy, lazy, lazy! It wasn't all bad for the Master System. It was hugely successful in Europe and it was almost untouchable by the NES and led to Sega investing more into the European market, thus creating Sega Europe. And it was also very successful in Brazil, where they actually still manufacture systems and games, with greatly improved cover art by the way. Despite those successes, it was ultimately overtaken by its successor, the Genesis, and Alex Kidd was replaced with a much more beloved mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog. It should be noted that the Master System's grid style matriculated over the Genesis, but was eventually phased out. It just really irks me that the makers of Master System games were so lazy to include decent cover art for the games. It's kind of like people who make videos and extend their length by including footage from movies. Though forgotten for its flaws, the Master System is still beloved by retro gamers. Many games have been imported to the Wii Virtual Console for a new generation of gamers to see what the NES's competition was in the early days. It's just a shame it can't show the covers of these wonderful Master System titles, with its signature style of fail.